Hi, and welcome to the Courtenay Turner podcast. I'm your host, Courtney, and I'm super passionate about moving and thinking. On this show, we are going to dive into all things health, fitness, personal development, lifestyle, and political, sociocultural. I've always been fascinated by people, and I love learning from the experiences and stories of others. This has been a treat for me, and I hope this is enjoyable and useful for you. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or any way that I can make this a better experience for you, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Okay, we're finally doing this. I'm super excited to embark on this journey with all of you. And I thought it would make sense for me to start by sharing my personal story. So I'll start by saying this. I am a huge believer that one of the things about being human is that none of us escape struggles, challenges, hardships, obstacles in life. That is a guarantee. However, I think one of the incredible things about human beings is our ability to thrive, surmount, the greatest of odds, and also to not only learn from our own experiences, but to learn from the experiences of others. And I think that's actually something that makes us really unique as a species. I don't think there are really other creatures that learn from other people's lessons and other people's or other beings, even lessons and hardships and experiences, and positive too. So I think that is something that human beings have that's really unique, and it's something that we should absolutely take advantage of. And it's part of why I feel it's really important for me to share my story, because I hope that it will inspire people. I'm hoping that maybe people can learn from me, because while none of us get out of here without, suffering and struggling and hardship, my story is definitely somewhat unique in that a lot of my struggles started from birth. I was faced with tremendous amount of physical challenges from a really early age. So I will start also by saying that we are all 1 in a trillion chance of being born. So we are all miracles. We all have tremendous capacity, unique gifts, and this is a particularly tough time. I think, it's an unprecedented time, a time of a lot of uncertainty. And so, during those times, people question a lot. And I think that the thing that really helps people is to have a sense of gratitude and to be really grateful and acknowledge how unique we are and how unique each and every person is. That everybody has, for all the struggles they have, for everything they may be dealing with, there's also unique gifts and something special that you have to offer. So I will start by sharing my story. So I was born with something called congenital rubella. What that means is that my mom had German measles during the first trimester of pregnancy. And that whole story is a little bit crazy. Neither of my parents were vaccinated. My father wasn't vaccinated, and he actually contracted the German measles and gave it to my mom. He caught it from my mom's doctor, the OBGYN, who he was friends with. They used to play tennis together and socialize, and the doctor's wife had been traveling and contracted with German measles and gave it to my father. My father was really sick. He had a fever, was delirious, fever of over 104 for, I think, well over a week. And my mom had really mild symptoms. She had like a rash on her upper chest, and she was pretty convinced, though, that even though her symptoms were very mild, that she had contracted German measles from my father. They can't test whether or not you have it, but they can test the titer to see if the baby has been affected. They tested the titer. They tested it as being 112, but it was really 121. The doctor was dyslexic. I, for one, am very grateful for this, because had he read the titer correctly, I would have been aborted. That would have been the advice my mother would have received, because most rubella babies do not survive very long. And if they do, their quality of life is very dismal. There's really no way to know, there's a wide range of what the symptoms and the quality of life might be. And so typically, at least at that time, that is what they would have offered. So I'm very grateful that he made a mistake, and I'm here to share this with all of you. Um, so I'll tell you a little bit about some of the challenges that I faced. I was born on a Super Bowl Sunday in the middle of a blizzard, and I was not arriving conveniently. I don't know that I've learned my lesson. Still battle tardiness on occasion. So they tried to induce labor so that my dad could watch the game with his friend, the doctor. And when they shot the epidural, I had already started to crown. And so my mom was tied up with spinal headache. For the first 2 weeks of my life, she couldn't hold me, she couldn't lift her head. But when she did, she noticed that one eye was rolling up on the top of my head, and she was very concerned, asked them to do all the tests, but the hospital knew that the doctor had made a mistake, and so they were covering for him. And they kept saying the tests were normal, when in fact, that was not true, and they were indeed covering for him. They kept telling my mom that, baby's eyes don't focus, because she was asking, why is one eye rolling up in the top of her head? And they said, it's normal, baby's eyes don't focus. And she said, but wait, one eye is focusing, so why isn't the other? And she realized that my maternal grandfather, her father, had cataracts at the time, and she said that my left eye looked a lot like his. She finally found a doctor who confirmed that I was born with a cataract in my left eye, and they had to remove the cataract. Cataracts removal back then was very different than it is today. Today, it's a routine procedure. It is minimally invasive. That was not the case back then. And so they pulled the iris, they left debris, and they had to go back in and do what's called a retinal cleanup. So when they did that, a few months later, I was only 3 months old when they did that first cataract procedure. They found rubella pigmentation behind my second eye, and they confirmed that I was indeed born with congenital rubella. At the time, they weren't sure what other symptoms or the severity of the condition would be, but they were pretty sure that there would be other complications. And they pretty much told my mom the best she could hope for me. They were not hopeful. They told her the best that they could hope was to find a nice institution to spend my life. Fortunately, my mom did not take that for an answer, and she was very determined to keep searching for help and hope. And so we kept going around to all the doctors, trying to figure out what was going on. And some of the other symptoms that we realized were that I'm significantly hearing impaired. I actually learned how to speak by reading lips. We didn't know the severity of my hearing loss at the time. I didn't get hearing aids until I was almost 6 years old. But it is a very significant hearing loss. So without my hearing aids, I do not hear very much. I can give you an example. I was in college and the fire alarm went off. And that's a really loud sound, right? And I had roommates, and they woke me up to tell me, fire alarm. And I could hear the slightest fainting, like they kept pointing to my hearing aid. And I was like, oh, are my hearing aids squeaking? Sometimes they feed back. And I was worried that I was waking everybody up. And they're like, no, put them in. And so I put them in, and all of a sudden I hear the fire alarm super loud. So that gives you a sense of, it's a pretty significant hearing loss. The first time I got hearing aids, the first thing I actually heard when I stepped outside, I was like, Mom, what is that noise? And my mom told me it was birds chirping. I had never heard it before. So that was pretty special. I still get very misty-eyed when I think about that. I think that's so awesome. So I'm really grateful for modern technology, but I was born in a kind of in-between time. The rubella vaccine had been around for quite a while, so there were very few rubella babies left. They didn't have many rubella clinics at the time. There was actually only one. I went to the Roosevelt Institute in New York City, But, it was really that in-between period where there wasn't much of the modern medicine, modern technology just yet, but also, people really weren't faced with, at least not in this country, most people weren't faced with congenital rubella because we had a vaccine. So it was an interesting time. Some of the other challenges are my growth was stunted. I was born with asymmetrical bone development, fine graphic motor impairment, missing 10 teeth, and hypertonic limbs. And this is a story I love to tell because a lot of times they put children who are born with hypertonia into a full body brace and then their muscles atrophy. Fortunately, we found a baby nurse who suggested putting me into a wet sandbox. She had this theory that the wet sandbox would be resistance because you have to fight against the sand, and that they would put toys that were just like slightly outside of my reach, and that I would have to reach for them. And she could see I was a very determined personality and that I would reach for the toys. And she said, kids love sand anyway, so, it might be fun for her. So that was the hope. And the hope was that it would create enough neuromuscular stimulus, and then the resistance would eventually lead to hypertrophy. And fortunately, that did work. And without going into my whole life story, because that will take kind of a while, I'll tell you that some of the things, that I'm super grateful for is that we did a lot of exercises, and a lot of them were very movement oriented. Some of them were more intellectual, visual stimulation, and they were integral to my healing and to my development. And so was the support and the hope of my family, the doctors that were supportive, and the technology like hearing aids and contacts. I wore a patch over my sighted eye every other day of my childhood. One of the things that we did actually, my mom came up with this idea and my grandfather built it. It was a balance beam, and they would make it narrower each week that I had completed it successfully. So they would build the beam. I had to walk on it every day, whether or not I had the patch over my eye or I didn't, and I didn't have hearing aids yet. So essentially I walked on this beam every other day. I was blind and deaf walking on this beam virtually. And when I completed it, then my reward was that this beam got more challenging. But it was a really, really useful tool in helping me to build proprioception. I don't get motion parallax. I can account for, like lack of depth perception intellectually. Basically, I measure my straight on vision against my periphery. My periphery is about 60% of what people who have two eyes would be, but I do have some peripheral vision. And so I measure my direct vision against the peripheral vision, and then I get a sense of what depth perception would be. Obviously, I'm not doing like a formal calculation in my head all the time, but it is a subconscious calculation, and I can account for that. What I can't account for is motion parallax. And that is, to give you an example of like, if somebody is playing catch, to determine where that ball would land or where to hold your hand, or glove, or like lacrosse ball, I played lacrosse, to know where to hold it. That is something I cannot account for, or even when you're jumping, knowing where you're going to land. But developing my kinesphere, developing my proprioception, it has been largely instrumental and really helpful in helping me to compensate for these things, and also helping me to build my vestibular sense, which is challenged because of my hearing, and of course, the hypotonia. So the more you can develop your kinesphere, the more you can compensate and adapt. And so movement has been a huge part of my development, my healing process, because I think the mind and body are so integrated. There's certainly so many studies have been done. Like one of the biggest tools we have for preventing cognitive decline is actually movement. And I call it movement, not like exercise training, because really it is about movement. So it doesn't have to be formal training in a gym. It has to be ways that you challenge yourself and that mind and body is integrated and involved in that process. So I won't go on for too much longer. I will be continuing to share more and more of my story, but I wanted to give you kind of a sense of some of the physical challenges that I've faced and had to overcome and that I still deal with today. And my hope is really in sharing all of this with you is to show the testament of the human spirit, to show that whatever challenges you're facing, you're not alone. We all have challenges. You never know what someone is dealing with. But we are also all incredibly gifted, capable, and have the capacity to overcome tremendous odds. And I'm hoping to explore, other people's stories of overcoming and finding their voice. So through this journey and in talking to other people, I'm going to explore lots of, obviously mental, physical healing, development, and improvement. That is one of my huge passions, but also, personal development, psychological, philosophical, and cultural lifestyle from many different angles, because I think that, we're here to explore, to learn, to grow, and to evolve both individually and as a species. And if I can help contribute toward that in any way, then I feel I have served. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope that it was useful to you in some way. And I'd love to hear your feedback. I'd love to hear if you have any questions, if there are things you'd like me to talk about on future episodes, then yeah, definitely reach out and connect with me. I look forward to hearing from all of you.